Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here doing my top 10 list for the Microsoft E3 2016 press conference. Getting right into it, number 10 I'm counting as the online slash feature showcase. So background music, Cortana, language selection independence, clubs, look for groups, as well as the arena stuff. All of that I thought was cool, very minor features, not a big deal to me. You can play background music on 360. It's probably not as integrated like Xbox play background music, but you can do that if you have like a USB. I used to do that for Grand Theft Auto 4, so you can do that on 360 already. Cortana, that I'm really curious about because they already have it where you can talk to your Xbox. I'm assuming it's just going to be more fluid. It just makes it easier, and I'm assuming you can actually ask it more things like you can do with Cortana. The language selection independence, that I don't have an Xbox One, so the way they described it made it seem like if you buy one, basically if you buy it in America, it only has English on there. That's the way it seemed. Where it's like you can pick whatever language no matter where you are. That's how it seemed. I don't know. You guys would have to tell me if that was truly the case, which I feel like I would have heard about because that's just insane. If we heard so much news about having to be online all the time, I'm pretty sure we would have heard about you can't have it in a different language if you buy it in America. That's a ton of people being excluded. So I don't know what that actually meant, but I thought that was weird. I had it underlined just to really talk about that. The clubs, making communities, PS4 has that, so I was like, all right, I didn't know Xbox didn't have it because I don't have one, but good for them. The looking for groups thing is probably my favorite because that's kind of like, just a mass, it's almost like a mass email to anyone and everyone. It's like, hey, need some people for this level of this game, you need to be this rank, or I'm just trying to play around in the next GTA or whatever. I just want to be in a game with like only 3 or 4 people or something. Maybe we'll do this. That I thought was cool. Just simpler to find new people, might help you find new friends or whatever. Tournaments, that's big for people way more experienced in games than I ever get. I play my online a little bit. That's it, but little elements that I thought were pretty nice. Number 9 is actually the Division DLC. Mostly, it's number 9 honestly because it's randomly generated missions. I just think for any game, that's a bonus. And I think for the Division, I never played it. I lost interest, honestly. I was really excited, and then reviews came out. It's kind of, so-so. And I just kind of forgot about it. But I think this DLC is actually pretty cool for people that, did enjoy the game. Or if you didn't, and you have the game, maybe you might find it worth it. I think at some point it could get repetitive. It's like 4 or 5 different types of missions, but it'll take you all over the place. Different, it'll scale based on difficulty, stuff like that as well. So that it just adds a lot. Technically, it adds limitless possibilities, but of course, it's like 5 different types of missions, so it won't be like forever. It's amazing, but that's always a great thing to add to a game. So I certainly thought it was worth adding to the list. Number 8. Number 8 was weird to put on here. It was kind of hard to put it so low, but it didn't blow me away. I had a little bit of bias, but it's scalebound. And the reason I have bias is because I love Platinum games. Bayonetta is like just one of my all-time favorites, period. I love Bayonetta. Um, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, despite the name, awesome game. And it's just really fun. And Transformers is great. They didn't do so amazing with the recent Ninja Turtles game, unfortunately, because I was super amped for that. Because Transformers and Ninja Turtles are like 2 of my favorites. So yeah, that kind of sucked to hear recently when that came out. But I'm still excited for it. Just watching the gameplay, I wasn't blown away. I like the fact that let's see, you can customize your character. I noticed all the characters look different, so that's either completely cosmetic or it's actually gear based, where different types of clothing give you different attributes. And they also all had different weapons, or at least I noticed for sure the one dude had like a giant sword compared to the other people. So I was like, alright, that I love. You can just have a different weapon. You aren't stuck like you use one blade or anything. You find different weapons. We saw some RPG elements in there as well, because if I remember right, there were like numbers coming off of the enemies and stuff, or the boss enemy. But it looked pretty cool. It probably didn't have that. I think it did at one point, somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember this earlier in so many games. But it was pretty cool. I thought I did enjoy it. It just wasn't like, it didn't blow me away. I felt like the person that they stuck on had the least interesting stuff throughout, like out of the 4 people. Like they did it at first and it was like, oh, he's shooting the arrows and the character notes like, oh, he's too far away. I was like, all right, they put that in there because like every demo is like, oh, let's have it where we show they say random stuff and they note how something isn't working. It's like, all right, that's why they had them do that. But then as they're going through, first off, I think maybe they should have fought smaller enemies compared to a big boss because, as we all know, every boss is just, you just hit them and the health goes down. You don't really see anything like super epic. We saw some stuff where it was blocking and moving around, but for the most part, it was a giant, giant boss, and that was pretty much it. But we got some cool moves. We got to see like the dragon toss, which I thought was cool. We actually got to see the main character riding the dragon. And I just felt the other characters were doing way cooler stuff. Like, if you go back and watch it, and you probably noticed it, the three other people, they took out like 75% of the damage on that boss. There was one dude at one point, it looked like he was just in a green orb of blades spinning around. I was like, I wish he would switch to that person because I'd like to see that animation up close. That looks freaking awesome. And they're doing flips and rolls and explosions and crowd. And he's just like, pew, throwing arrows. And I was like, this isn't entertaining. The coolest part was the dragon toss, and then he was like holding on to like the muscle of the crab, and he was like punching it. That was my favorite part of what that person did, at least. So I was like, I wasn't blown away by the footage they actually showed us, but still excited. Like I said, Platinum Games, I love them, and I just hope it plays out really well. I'm still, curious about the story. We still didn't really get any of that, but I do like the character. He actually put on headphones to listen to music, so I thought that was kind of a cool little touch. But customizable character, multiple weapons, RPG elements, kind of tag team with the dragon. We got to see like the actual scale mode of the character multiple times throughout the battle, so that was kind of cool as well. But it just didn't really blow me away based on the footage that we actually got to see. Number 7 is actually the Xbox One Play Anywhere thing, so you can transfer data from your Xbox One to your Windows 10 PC, as they kept saying. I thought that was really cool. One thing that I found out after the fact, which I'm kind of glad that I didn't get to see, or I didn't get to do this video right after, because I never would have known this, but in order to do that, you have to buy the digital version. And that I heard during one of the interviews, and it was like, yeah, it's like digital only where you get to do that. And they certainly didn't put that, because I was like, oh, unless I missed it. I could have missed it, but I'm pretty sure I was paying attention, because it's like, oh, I could buy this game and play it on my PC wherever I go. And they didn't mention like, oh, it has to be digital only, which may have missed, but that was one of the segments I'm pretty sure I was paying 100% attention to. So if you want to do that, and for some people that doesn't matter, I personally like to get physical copies. It's less worth it at this point, I guess, because now the best we can ask for really is like, oh, I can take the cover out and flip it backwards or something, because we don't get anything outside of here's how you use a PS4, little stupid stuff. But that I thought was kind of interesting. They didn't note it that it was digital. It was probably in there in like some tiny text or something like, yeah, this is actually digital only, and it like flew past the screen. But it has to be digital in order to get the Play Anywhere feature. You can't just buy a game and then it's like, this is how you unlock the copy on your PC, which I wish they would have done that, and maybe they didn't because, really they didn't want to, because they could have. They could have easily done it where it's linked to your actual account. Because if you do it where it's like, oh, you get a code, that's one thing, because you could just have it where it's like, alright, well, you just give a code to your friend and they have it if you don't care about that. But they could have done it where it links to a Microsoft account or something like that. And, they could have done it. They could have easily done it through the physical means where like it tracks the fact that you've played that game or you own it. But that's probably the same reason. It's like, oh, well, that game played on your console, that could have been your buddy. So that's probably why they did it, because they don't want people to have, be able to like help out their friends, little stuff like that. So you have to buy the digital version. So that kind of bothered me. I don't know if that would have put it lower on my list if I knew that, if they mentioned it during the thing. It probably would have a little bit, because it would have been like, oh, that's cool, and then it would have took it right away, because it forces you to buy the digital version, which, that's only an issue, if you really buy a bunch of games, that's what makes it worse, because you have not only a ton of saves, but the actual games, themselves. So that was kind of the issue for me there once I found out after the fact. But still had me excited during the conference. But, that's it. Number 6, another thing, which this was during the conference, it was like super cool. Also super weird because it annoyed me a little bit. It was like a great announcement, but at the same time, a weird timing of the announcement, which you could probably guess why. And there are two technically, I guess, but for me, it was the Scorpio that I thought was the bigger issue out of the announcements. Because them doing like the Xbox One Slim, I was like, all right, that I can see that. But the Scorpio, it's just the timing of it seems so insane to me. It's like, hey, we have the new Xbox One S coming out or Xbox One Slim, and it's gonna be super cheap. It has there's supposed to be like three different versions, but I believe the 2 terabyte version is $299. I heard that they have multiple versions, but the 2 terabytes is supposed to be out first, so I believe that is really $299, and the others will be cheaper. But the Scorpio comes out and it's like we have 6 teraflops. Of course, I have to read this. We have 6 teraflops GPU, 8 CPU cores, more than 320 gigabytes memory bandwidth, and it's the only one out of the Xbox Ones, or well, technically it's not an Xbox One because they would have just called it that. It's a brand new console, but out of the, you can't even call it current gen, but Xbox One is not going to do VR, but the Scorpio will. And there's no price on it just yet, but it does come out next year. And the reason it's at 6 is because it's one of those weird things. It's like, I love it because it's like, alright, that's cool. A new console, it's, so high end, it's basically like the top of the line, at least currently, for like what Nvidia has, even though it'll be behind by the time it actually comes out. But it's just like, it's such a weird timing for it. It's like, why bother doing another version? I guess to get more money, like let's do a smaller version of the Xbox One and get people invested and try to get more money as we have new games coming out. And the thing with Scorpio is like, hey, all the stuff that you bought will work for Scorpio. So maybe they will change the name, but considering they called it something else, it makes me think it's not going to be called like the Xbox One. Maybe they'll go back to using Elite or something like that because we have the Slim, and then they'll do Xbox One Elite and just kind of reverse it. But I just felt the timing was off, and that's kind of what put it so low on the list. It was like, it's kind of the same as the transfer thing, except it was during the conference, and it's like, yeah, it's just a bigger announcement because it's a brand new thing, so it still goes above just, oh, transfer data. But, yeah, I don't know, just the placement of it I thought was off. It was kind of like if they did, the Elite, and then it's like, yeah, but next year we have whatever they were calling the Xbox One, whatever that code name was, which I think was cooler than Xbox One, now that I remember. But it'd be like if they were doing the Elite, which was the second version of the 360, which did come out fairly recently after. I mean, it's only been a couple of years, and so we have the second version. That I understand Sony's doing the same thing, even though they didn't actually talk about it this year, or at least not yet at their conference. But it just seemed weird to me. So it's like, it's still cool because it's a new console, but now it's like this weird turmoil, because it's like, well, the current console is much cheaper and I can finally play those Microsoft exclusive games, but I know there's much better systems coming out which has like even better 4K because it's unlocked or something. They described it, I just don't understand it, but it's just better in every regard. But it's also probably going to be like $400, $500 or something like that, especially considering the specs and everything. So it's just really weird. Just timing and cost is another thing. It's just like, yeah, next year it comes out, and also just how quickly it's coming out. Because if they announced it and it's like, this is just something we're working on, and it'll come out like in, even if it was like in 2 years or 3 years maybe, especially if it was like 3 years down the line, because it'll be like a solid 5 to 6 years for Xbox One, and then 3 years for the current Xbox Slim. So that I could get, but it's just like, yep, next year we got basically a brand new thing. And like I said, it could end up coming out as the third version of the Xbox One, but you think they would just call it, it's like, the Xbox One, or maybe, because they don't have a specific title, but it might come out as that, and that's probably why all the games work, and that's one of the things, like, everything you buy works on the Scorpio, if you decide to get it. But just how it all comes together with timing and how much it'll cost, and like, I want that because it's much better, but it's like, I also want I want an Xbox One right now because it's much cheaper and I want a lot of these games. But what's the point? I feel like it's just really costing them money, to be totally honest. But that's my number 6. I don't want to spend any more time on it. It's my number 6. Number 5 kind of gets back into the games that excited me. This one kind of surprised me that I put it at number 5, but it was actually Sea of Thieves. The the ships sink, which I thought was really cool. That was kind of my favorite part about it. I don't know why that was such a big deal. It's like, wow, the ships actually sink. It's not like, oh, we took damage, and probably because Assassin's Creed, ships don't sink, you just die. So it was like the ships take damage. I would assume you could fix them up if you do it. Maybe they have the whole bucket thing, like you take a bucket down and then you walk out, toss it out into the water, and keep doing that. Maybe to save the ship, and if you have enough materials, you can board up the holes and save yourself from sinking. And there are other people always in the game, so it's an open world thing. We didn't get to really see any hand to hand combat with guns and swords, but it's pirates, so we will at some point. I am curious if it's a story, because at this point, without there being a story, it kind of seems like it's really like it's just an MMO game. So curious to see how they do that, if they're gonna do an actual story driven thing, and it's like, oh well, everyone has the same story, which is an MMO pretty much. But I'm curious how they're gonna play that out. But it excited me. I thought it was actually pretty cool. Number 4 is actually Dead Rising 4. Simply put, Frank is back, so we get more picture stuff. Even though that's not too old that they did that, because before 3 they had the redone version of 2 plus the DLC, where you can play as Frank again if you were the second player at least. And I don't even know if they did the camera stuff. I'm pretty sure they did though, but it hasn't been like forever since we got to use the camera. But Frank is back as the main character. It's set during Christmas. They got even crazier contraptions, like the zombie catapult thing, where it sent one up, and then I don't know if there's something I didn't see in the front, like it was like a vacuum sucking up other zombies, but like it shot one off, and then the little flap went down, and then another zombie just like slid right on top, and then it flung out in the air. He had like the candy cane crossbow thing going on, so I was like, this is awesome. More even crazier inventions and combinations. And Frank is back, so just the picture element. Not to mention the fact that it's with on new consoles, him taking pictures. That's like 100, hundreds of zombies, possibly thousands, or around 1,000 zombies in a single picture. That's really cool. They'd also have to really balance that, because now they have such a wide scope of how many can be on screen at once. They might have to tweak how many points we get for stuff like that. But it just seemed cool. It's cool to have him back. He's the one who started it all. There's one scene when he's on the motorcycle. It's really fun. I was like, he looks like Negan from The Walking Dead. But I thought it was cool. It's like, it was really simple. It just had me excited. I love Dead Rising. I haven't gotten to play 3, and I wanted to wait. I wanted to get it on Xbox One because the PC version has so many, like a billion issues. That's why I never played it. So, it still has me excited. It's Dead Rising. Even if I haven't played the last 3 games, I'd still be excited for the next Dead Rising because I just love it. But that's my number 4. Number 3 is We Happy Few. I'd seen Let's Plays of this before, and I thought it was cool because it had a creepy 60s vibe. And it's like, you take the pill and everything looks really beautiful, but once the pill fades off, it starts to look really creepy. And there's sort of which they kind of showed in the gameplay, people can tell when you're off of the joy, as they call it. But in this, it was actually story based. So I always love a good story, because that was kind of just like, I didn't even know what the point of it was. I think it was get from here to here, but it was like the beta. So getting the actual story and knowing you are this one character who's trying to escape and maybe find the woman that disappeared and figure out where people go when they're not on their joy, that I thought was cool. The best part for me personally was definitely the rat pinata thing, because when he hit it and the joy completely went away and it was like a rat exploding and they're just like eating pieces of this dead rat, I was like, that blew away every piece of footage I'd seen about the game up to that point. I was like, I want this now, just because of that, because it was just such a crazy story moment for that character to see the world shift like that. So I love that. Number 2 is Tekken 7. Super quick transition there, but number 2 is Tekken 7. It just really surprised me. I thought it was going to be Tekken Cross Street Fighter. It ended up being just a part of the actual story, so that's kind of why it got me so excited. It's like they're basically saying, Street Fighter and Tekken are the same universe now. tons of possibilities for that for future games. I'm sure they'll stick to just Akuma. But I love that. I love Tekken in general, and it just visually looked great. I love how they did the story elements. Like, it went from cutscene to gameplay, back to cutscene and more. No loading whatsoever. It may have bugged people that, it was like the QTE moments in there, like push up and these two buttons, but I didn't mind. I think for a fighting game, that actually kind of works, especially like an actual one-on-one fighting game like Tekken. That, I think, definitely works. I love the pre-order thing for Tekken Tag Tournament 2, although I don't think I'll do that. I want Tekken Tag Tournament 2, but I'm not super invested in the story of Tekken. I just love those games, and I just play them when I get the chance. Before I get to my number one, I have a couple honorable mentions. General Ram and Killer Instinct, thought that was cool. Gears of War 4, I thought looked okay, didn't really blow me away. Final Fantasy 15, same thing. It was kind of like with Scalebound. It was just the footage was really boring to me, because they even said it was like, check out this fast-paced footage, and I wrote, not as fast-paced. And it was just the guy kept getting hit by the giant until the very end when they threw like the ice grenades and shattered the arm. I was like, this kind of looks okay. They did the date, which they may have already announced that somewhere else, but September 30th this year, so that was cool. Recore, same thing. The footage didn't get me, but I was really excited for the game when it was announced last year. And something I saw for an interview, it seems like there's color-based damage. They didn't talk about it, but it was like, and I noticed that during the video that there were different color creatures and stuff, and during the little extra footage I saw, there was like RPG elements where you get like XP and it shows the damage, but it was like a red enemy and a blue weapon, and no damage came up, so maybe it's like you don't really get XP for those enemies if you don't use the right weapons, but it still killed that enemy, so that I thought was pretty cool. And going to my number one, it's the Xbox One Slim. It was the greatest thing. I thought. It's 40% smaller, IR blaster, 2 terabytes, which I thought was great, integrated power supply, super tiny, and it's $299. 4K plus Blu-ray as well. All that stuff is great. It just, kind of the same thing. It still was like my favorite announcement, but now it's still the Scorpio thing. I don't really need to spend so much time because I talked about it with Scorpio, but that's my number one, and I still kind of have to struggle as to whether or not I'm going to go with that now. But that's my top 10. My camera's going to go off really soon, so hopefully I can finish this out and don't have to do this a third time, because it's my second time. But I definitely want to know what you guys thought about this conference, so please, put your comments down below. Rearrange my list. Tell me what your list is, your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And, of course, thank you guys for watching.